Welcome, wandering souls and lost sailors, to the Ship of the Dead podcast.
Welcome aboard, my hearties. How would you be doing? My guest today is none other than the Brian Colin, one of my favorite people on the planet. He is the co-creator of Vastgrim RPG. His newest project, Sqwurmish, is a miniature agnostic skirmish game compatible with Forbidden Psalm set in the Vastgrim universe. It's funding now on Kickstarter. Not too long before I hit record, it reached its funding goal, so it's definitely being made. Brian, welcome back to the Ship of the Dead.
Thank you for having me back, Luke. It's always awesome to get to see you.
I would like to imagine that today the Ship of the Dead we're not in 1715. We're not watching the ghostly blue-green sails flap in the winds of the Dark Caribbean. Instead, we're on some like really fucked up space cruiser.
Yes.
Of the dead, like blasting with like neon lights everywhere. And like, it's like run by worms. What do you think? What do you think else going on this Ship of the Dead in the future?
So I think like we've recently like just annihilated a whole colony, some mining colony, and we've plastered their bodies to the outside of the hull of the ship for the ones that we could not infect, like the ones where the worms just didn't like their host body. So the rest of them we just slathered on top. It's dripping down as we're soaring through space, going real fast. It's leaving streaks as it goes on the viewport. Yeah.
Dude, I feel like we're kind of like got like a Mad Max vibe where we just do that. Like the one dude is out front, like the rest of the undead are waiting to leave, and they're like, "No, come on!" He's like, "No!" And he's like perfecting his masterpiece of dead corpses just plastered to the outside. Of course, they're all gone by the time we arrive because we blast off through the atmosphere.
Yes, I see that you're infected. I see the worm kind of crawling around under your skin.
Love that for us. Let's get to the meat of this podcast right at the gate. Right, what is Sqwurmish? I mean, obviously, it's not just a clever name, although it is a very clever name.
Thank you.
What is this thing? What is Sqwurmish?
Skirmish games are pretty new to me, right? It's a huge part of our hobby, but I've never really super gotten into them. In the past couple of years, Wyatt, my son, who you know, has gotten more and more into them. And the more of those that I played that were more like straight, like shoot 'em up versions where that's the whole point. I was like, I want to try something else. So I had a couple of the Forbidden Psalms.
Wait, pause. Like which ones has he been playing that were very shoot 'em uppy?
So there was High Noon, and a lot of the way that we play Marvel Crisis Protocol is very like you versus me. And that's kind of like how we played, even though I know there's other play modes. Yeah, so I had Forbidden Psalm, I had the Dread Knights, which is like the vampire version of it. And I was like, well, I should pull these off my shelf and read them, and we should try that. And I tried that, and I like it because it leans a little closer to the RPG side. Mm-hmm. You know, the character creation is very similar. The roles and mechanics are very similar. You've got like 5 not dumbed down, but, you know, characters that are slimmed down from what a regular character sheet is. And I could set it in my existing universe and use basically the same mechanics that are in the Vastgrim rules, just kind of pared down a little bit. And it was ready to go. Writing scenarios for it's fun and easy because I already have all these little bits and pieces of lore. And I also like, because I don't come from the skirmish background, I think I may be approaching it slightly different because like I have the scenarios that are in the book, the 13 that are in there, they come in like 3 episode arcs where like the 3 parts are kind of interconnected. And then they can all connect together, with the last one being a 4 episode story for the grand finale. But like, so they each are thematically different, but they also have different like goals. And so it's all slightly different. Like, hey, we're going to a space station where this mutagen is leaking all over the place. In scene 1, we have to shut it off because it's turning the people on the space station into these horrible mutants. And then like there's different things throughout before you can actually go back to your hideout and level up and put your XP into bettering what you have.
Wait, so where does the pendulum land for you in Sqwurmish as far as cooperative versus competitive?
So there's cooperative and there's versus mode. So
but
it
like those scenarios, are those scenarios written to work both ways?
They are. And they have different, like each one has it kind of listed out differently if co-op versus, and then also if you play more than 2 players or if you play solo. So it all kind of staggers based on that. And even certain scenarios have different bonuses based on the type of faction you are. like we're flying around in the spaceship and we're people that want the end of the universe to come, right? We're worshiping the worms. That faction, the Devout, gets extra points at the end of the scenario if there's Grimm still alive in the scenario, if certain things happen.
Oh, cool. That's a cool way to do it. Like faction bonuses in the scenarios.
Yes.
It's really interesting that we're talking about this right now, because I think when we scheduled this, I was like, oh, cool. Brian's doing a skirmish game. Yeah, those are in right now. That seems like a logical next step for him to do a Forbidden Psalm hack, which we'll talk about in a second. But last week I had Zach on. Dude, it's been a wild week. Let me just explain to you, because like this is my background with war games, right? When I was in high school, I was like, into drugs and music, that was not into gaming really, except when I got in a lot of trouble and I couldn't leave, then I would get into games and play with my brother, But then after high school, I stopped doing drugs and I started a company and I wasn't doing music as much. I was like, I need a hobby. So I was like, I'm going to play 40K, And I like bought some Eldar, and then they got to be painted good. So I bought some Dark Angels, and I spent like a week painting one squad of Dark Angels. And I think I played against my brother like once or twice and got whipped. And I was like, I hate this. I hate painting miniatures. I hate these big, long, complicated battles that don't mean anything. And I haven't played since, right?
Yes.
Love role-playing games just like you, right?
Yep.
Last week I have Zach on the program, and I'm like, what Kickstarters have you been, like, as part of the like lightning barrage round, what Kickstarters have you been excited about? And he tells me about Trench Crusade, which I had not like heard of at all.
Man, they did so well.
Dude, their Kickstarter, they're at like 5 or 6 million, including backer kit add-ons.
And have you gone to like the what's the miniature STL website as well?
Oh yeah, My Mini Factory.
Right, because then that's where it like totally jumps up.
Yeah, this skirmish thing has like infected my brain.
Yes.
Maybe you knew that we were going to talk about this, and you sent the worms to like, yeah, because like, so I went down the rabbit hole of Trench Crusade, which is an incredible game. And part of it's so incredible is that it's very similar. It's a little darker, but it's very similar to the Dark Caribbean in that it's like, hell is meshing with Earth,
right?
An alternate timeline, the game designer for that game is the guy who created the Mornheim rules. And I went down that rabbit hole, and then that's even more like the Dark Caribbean. And I'm like, wait, these are like small band 10 model skirmish games that you can play that have a campaign so the characters can like level up and stuff.
Yep.
And there's a narrative. And I'm like, now I'm like all the way in. And we have been talking about doing a skirmish game. Like Tyler was going to do it all.
It's going to make Tyler so happy.
But no, you don't understand. Like now I'm like, do we need to buy another resin printer? Like, do I need to buy all these, Now we're talking about playing skirt. And so then I'm like, oh my God, I get to talk to Brian today, who just literally just hacked Forbidden Psalm. I'm like, this is like literally perfect for me. So I want to know about, like, obviously you started to talk about the like original Descent, but like, I think the answer is obvious to people who know what Forbidden Psalm is, but why Forbidden Psalm? What is that? Tell our listeners what Forbidden Psalm is, and why did you pick that for your hack?
So Forbidden Psalm is based off of the core Mörk Borg rules. So in many ways, almost all of your difficulty rolls that you roll, you're going to roll a D20 and your difficulty is going to be a 12 or higher, or like you need to get 12 or higher. Very similar. You have the same stats that you would have as a character sheet in that. So you're used to the strength, agility, toughness, presence, that sort of thing. So everything kind of converts over. Armor, instead of like if it's a D2, you round, it's just an armor of 1. If it's a D4, it's an armor of 2. So everything converts very easily. You can even like pull monsters in. So since Vast Grimm was like a hack of Mörk Borg, it only made sense that if I was doing Sqwurmish to do a hack of Forbidden Psalm, because it was already there. There's a couple of things that I tweaked in my rules. They have things like where if you're fighting a monster, you roll for the monster to attack. Whereas I like the player facing part of Mörk Borg where you roll to see if you can avoid it. So I kind of made it lean more into the RPG side of that side of things.
So if you're playing against me, and there are monsters on the board, am I rolling to attack your guys? But do you see what I'm asking? Yeah,
absolutely. So monsters are always going to see like whatever is in their line of sight that is closest, that is not of their type. So if you're closest and they have a ranged attack, they're going to attack you first. If they don't have a ranged attack, or if they're not in range but they have a ranged attack, they're going to move, then attack. If they don't have a ranged attack, they're going to move until they can get within combat, like melee combat of you or close combat. If they have a ranged attack and they can't actually get to you in time, they'll go and try and get behind cover first.
Okay, but like, so if a monster is attacking you, you would roll to defend. But if I were attacking you, I would roll to attack?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yep, totally.
Okay, gotcha. Makes sense.
Yeah, when it's PvP, it's a little different.
When it's PvP, does your defense, like agility, come into factor at all?
It does not, no.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So, I mean, Forbidden Psalm, I mean, actually, you know, I've had it for a while and I've been familiar with it and I've looked at it a bunch. But I read it cover to cover last weekend because I was like, oh man, like I got to like learn about this skirmish thing. Cause I, you know, like I said, the thing for me is like, I'm not a war gamer because I don't really like competitive games and I'm much more into story and character development. But like, dude, this is a good time for that. Like, I think it's a good time. I mean, a really good way to explore these kinds of games would be like you're running your RPG campaign, but maybe some guys don't show up today and you just want to do a one-off with the one player, or you have a big mega battle. Like you don't really want to do, I mean, Mörk Borg and Vastgrim are pretty rules light,
right? Yeah.
But if you have 30 dudes on the table, like that can be pretty time consuming for a normal RPG.
Totally.
Switch to the skirmish rules, right?
Right. Yep. And then also like I had never like built terrain before, you know, I sculpted all these other things for my books, but golly, I love making weird stuff. I love like the crafting part of terrain building and that sort of thing is so fun. And it's just a different, like, it's very relaxing because like I can just start making it and see where it goes. And like, that's how I'm building scenarios. It's like I have an idea in my head and then I'm starting to actually build it out. And then I photograph those for the layout, like the actual pieces to then bash up.
Oh, very cool.
You know, kind of to match my existing style. But yeah.
Wait, so let's talk about the miniatures because this Kickstarter, the game, like Forbidden Psalm, is a miniatures agnostic game, which I feel like is the way forward for any community-based company.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
I mean, you know, like I think we've all learned from Games Workshop, whether you're into wargaming or not, like their model is built on like, hey, you can't compete unless everything in your army we bought from us, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, I hate that sort of price model where only the people that are rich can afford to play. I want you to be able to go and grab,
whatever you want.
I've got a Lego figure, this is going to be this guy. Or I've got a rock, this is going to be this monster. You know, whatever you got.
The first real big example I know of this is Frostgrave, because Frostgrave is like, hey, you pick a wizard and 9 other models of anything from your D&D collection and boom, you can play this war game. And you know what? They also have a whole line of miniatures. So it's like really works well. Yeah. But so like your Kickstarter is like mostly for the book and then the different tiers of miniatures are unlocking as stretch goals. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
So tell us about the miniatures. Did you do the concept design? Did you do the sculpting? Like what was that process like?
So at Granite State Comic-Con in New Hampshire, Doug helps organize the gaming side.
Our good friend Doug Shute, who's now at Gamma.
That's right.
Hi, Doug. We love you.
He placed me next to Brian Shutter, the Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland.
Perfect. You guys are, I mean, I told you when I had him on the show, I was like, you guys are going to be best friends if you're not already.
Right. And so we had never actually, our paths may have crossed, but we never actually met. So, you know, getting to know each other over the weekend. And he had his minis that Saul Blair had sculpted of Malevolent minis. And,
because he has a little like battle royale game, right?
Yeah, and then he also has the roller brawl game as well.
Yeah.
So he came and Saul, who sculpted them for him, came to the show because he lives like not too far from there, and he picked up Vastgrim at the show, and we just chatted. And I didn't think anything of it because at the time this was already starting to percolate, the Sqwurmish, but it was just going to be a book because it was like I was going, just got to make the book and that's it. But then I saw him again at GameholeCon, and then I was like, okay. I reached out after GameholeCon. I was like, hey, would you have any interest in doing some Vastgrim minis? And he was on board. And I just gave him I gave him descriptions of stuff that he didn't have from the core book, and I let him go with his imagination.
Oh, nice. So you didn't have to do like full designs. Like if you were working at a video game company or something.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, part of the joy for me in making a RPG is having it open-ended enough to let other people interpret things.
Yeah,
so
sure.
It's exciting to me to see where somebody else is going to take it, even though it might not be the direction I would have gone.
Well, that's got to be cool. Do you have any like favorite miniatures from the ones that he's made?
So one of the last ones that he did was the Void Revenant, which is kind of like an apparition-y skeletal guy in a spacesuit. That one's one of my favorite. I love the Turgis worm just because that's the worm that's on the cover of the core book.
Yeah, of course.
That's based off of that and also an illustration I did of the side view of it.
Are all those revealed?
Those are, yes. Those are in the creatures pack. And then there's also the Salzarite, which is kind of my cricket spider-like creature. Mm-hmm. That's something that's been in my previous fantasy setting. It's been in this. It's like one of the creatures that I bring with me everywhere I go. Sure. So that has a special place in my heart too.
Yeah, that's very cool. I have to imagine that like getting to see some of the things that you've like dreamed up become real sculpts has got to be cool. I mean, have you printed any of them yet?
So I've only gotten 4 of the characters and one of the like small versions of the Grim, just because we've been behind on the timeline for that a little bit. So I haven't gotten all of them, but I know they're going to turn out awesome. And he's going to print oversized ones for me so that I have them for like, for my display area to have those.
Are you going to paint them?
Yeah, I am. And I'm like, I'm not a mini painter. Like I painted the ones that are in
You're not
Kickstarter
now.
Page.
You're about to be.
Yeah, but now I am. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's, I don't know. It's so interesting to see we have such similar trajectories in such very different ways because I'm like on the same path and we're not going to be able to get to it on our end for a couple years because we're going to do Dark Caribbean first, but naval combat alone is begging for miniatures. Like we need to do that,
I'm thinking like if I jump from this to starships and be able to go in between with your crew and then do an adventure this way and jump back and forth. I mean,
so do you have any ideas on how that will work?
Not yet.
It's for me, it's like the big thing that like I was telling Tyler when we were kicking around ideas about this for ours, a couple months ago, that like the number one design pillar needs to be that you can take your Pirate Borg character into the skirmish game.
Right.
No conversion, which is pretty easy because it's the same rules system, There'll
be some slight conversions. There's going to have to be
like for example, if you're using normal armor, you're going to have to convert to, instead of D6, you just negate 3, The other second pillar for us is that you need to be able to play, especially in Pirate Borg, you need to be able to play a ship battle.
Right.
And when the ships smash, you need to be able to switch to mini combat, like melee combat, But then I'm like, well, that's hard to do. Like, you don't want to play out like 10 different battles, If you say just it's heroes to heroes, you don't want to like, what if they never smash together? So I'm curious to see if you've thought about, it'll be a little different with spaceships because you're probably more likely to have like the crew has one Millennium Falcon type,
Right. Yeah. I think with that, you do it scenario based, right? So if it's in a bigger story idea, scenario 1, you're on the ship and then you get to this place for scenario 2.
Yeah.
And then scenario 3 is either you're still somewhere on land or you're getting back on the ship, and also kind of adds variety for the players as well. So it keeps things fun and mixes things up.
Yeah, that's a great way to deal with it. Yeah, but it'll be cool. So like you have spaceship combat rules. How complicated are they compared to like what they would be for a skirmish game?
They're basically Pirate Borg rules, so how complicated it is. I don't think it would be that challenging to switch it over.
When I wrote the Pirate Borg ones, I literally wrote them like to be scalable. They work 1v1, like one ship versus one ship.
Yeah, but
it's like it's more fun if your players have 2 or 3 ships, so everybody can take multiple actions,
Yeah, absolutely. I think since you were in this, you're playing 5 different characters in a crew. If each player just has one ship, I think that's fine. And especially if you put in other ships that are threats, kind of like you would do with the monsters in the skirmish side. And they're going to see what they're like, whichever ship
they're
is
going to shoot at
closest,
whoever,
Yeah,
that'd be cool. Obviously you'll do the like one ship versus one ship, and then the undead shows up for both of us. You could do that. Absolutely,
and then you're putting in random terrain like asteroids and things like that, or little islands that are blocking line of sight. Of
asteroids for you, islands for me, baby. It's the same thing, right?
Yep.
So wait, is there 3-dimensionality at all in your game?
No, not really.
Yeah, you just go with like the Spelljammer single plane.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It's just easy.
Yeah, back when I was thinking about doing Limithron's Guide for naval combat, but for Spelljammer, like Limithron's Guide to space combat, I was thinking we would just do like stacks of dice or bottle caps to like, oh, this guy's at height 3 and this guy's at height 2, but whatever,
Right. Yeah, you could totally do that, but I'd rather keep it easy and fast.
Yeah, of course. Now, you said something interesting. You said 5 miniatures. Does that mean that your game, the core version, is like your warband is 5 dudes?
Yes. Yep.
What do you call them? Just a crew?
Crew. Yep.
Yeah, nice. And what can you walk us through how you like build the warband?
So like when you're building a crew for Sqwurmish, you're going to pick 5 models to represent your character. And like this is new to me, so everything I've read, it's like they always call miniatures, they call them models. So I'm doing the same thing in Sqwurmish.
Yeah. They're models, yeah.
Yeah. You could pick them ahead of time, or you could wait and figure out your character and then pick them. You assign each one a name, then you randomly roll their background. So their background is going to give them some sort of extra thing. Sometimes it's extra gear, sometimes it might modify a stat, something like that. You can make one of them a specialist. These specialists are kind of based off of the core 8 classes in the main Vasgrim book. Okay. Plus there's something else. So if you were to port in your character from Vasgrim, you'd be like, oh, this is a Manchine. I get what their thing is here because that's what my class is.
Yeah, okay.
Easy, quick conversion. And then once you pick your specialist, you spend a little bit of your credits. You start your crew with 200 credits to spend. If you want to have a specialist, you pay a little bit of money so that you can have them. And they just have a little bit of extra bonus that isn't like just a normal crew member. You then pick a faction. I've got 4 factions. I've got the Devout, which I mentioned earlier. They're the ones that want the universe to come to a close. Yeah. You've got the Harvesters. They like extract worms from people that are fallen or even live people, and they get extra credits if they bring worms back in between scenarios.
Sweet.
You've got a Legion, which is like kind of like your normal playing group in Vasgrim. So a motley crew of people that are surviving the universe. And then you have Raiders, which are like space pirates. And each one of them, they start with a respirator, a different that's one of their benefits. After picking the faction, you assign abilities to the models. There's 2 different arrays that you can pick from anywhere from -3 to +3 that you add to your characters. You assign hit points, you roll a feat, you roll a flaw, and then you get the creds to then spend on additional weapons, armor, gear, med packs, things like that you might not have had from your background or your specialist.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So it's super fast.
That's where the customization would come in, is just picking the gear. Right.
That's where it would start. And then as you go in between scenarios and you earn the reward credits, and based on the faction that you picked, each faction has a different type of hideout, and you can spend experience points or credits to upgrade your hideout. And certain things will give you something like start each scenario with this or different things. So based on what you upgrade your hideout to. So by the time you've played 6 or 7 scenarios, you've kind of leveled up a bit. You've got more gear. Maybe you hired somebody else and you pick between these 2 before you go into a scenario. So now you have 6 people in your crew, but only 5 can go on missions.
Building a little roster. I like that. Yeah, I mean, I have to imagine that building these games out on the campaign level is very Darkest Dungeon. I mean, I've played a lot of Darkest Dungeon, but not a lot of skirmish games, and I'm like, oh yeah, like this guy broke his arm in the last combat. This guy got infected by a worm. That kind of thing. Do you have like tables to roll on where if they, like in Mornheim and Trench Crusade, when your model goes down, it's called out of action instead of killed. And then at the end of the combat, you roll to see what happens to that unit. Is there anything like that in this?
Yes. And same thing with Forbidden Psalm. They're downed unless they take additional damage once they're downed. And then at the end of the scenario, you roll a D20, they make a toughness test, but it's a DR6. So chances are it's going to be
so it's like a little bit of a death save. Yeah. Right. Okay. So you can coup de grace them though, and then they're out of the campaign.
Yes. Yeah.
Totally. Okay. Cool. All right. Cool.
And then there's also just like in Mörk Borg and Pirate Borg and Vasgrim, there are in this, I call them favors, omens, where you can do the different things, but you have the list of them, and you can do one of each per scenario one time
for the whole team.
For the whole team, yeah.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
That's actually a stretch goal where it's going to be a printed card that you check off in a dry erase thing.
Oh, nice. So dry erase. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that you really got to think about. Like if you can reroll, if you can do all those Devil's Luck omen things, then it slows down the skirmish part. But 5 models is that's not too many,
No, it goes by pretty quick, especially most scenarios usually wrap up around six rounds.
Dude, do you set it at that?
Like in Forbidden Psalm, a lot of them say ends in 6 rounds. Yeah, most of what I have written is a specific thing happens, and then some of them have it or 6 rounds.
Yeah,
right.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
You've got to get everybody down this elevator shaft, but only 2 people can go down the elevator per round.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's all sorts of threats and things blocking, so it's going to, once you get down that, then the scenario's over.
Very cool. Very cool. Man, that's going to be fun. It's going to be a nice change of pace. I feel like, I'm working on Trapped in the Tropics right now, which is the adventure that comes in our starter kit. And, you know, like it's a real adventure, a 4-part intro adventure. And it's like, and I'm incapable of like, you know, like when I look at like Rot Block Sludge or a lot of OSR adventures, like sometimes it's just like, oh, there's just a fucking weird monster here. Like you got to kill it. If this room doesn't make sense, there's a lot of that. And I feel like for me, it's not that I'm not good at that. I just can't get past it not making sense.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm always like, what does this monster want? How did it get here? Even if it's like they never tell the players, I'd still like to know that. But the idea of switching to like the ship is sinking and you got to get off, or in your case, like you got to get down the elevator shaft. Like that sounds so refreshing to not have to like worry about so much narrative, you know?
Yes. But like, I still want the narrative elements to be there.
Of course. Yeah.
Like, so there's these Grim Core guards that are outside, and then there's the Salzrites that I had mentioned earlier. They live on this type of asteroid, so they're coming in as well. So the things being there, there's a reason for why they're there. But yes, it's very fast. And also, like all the adventures now, like I'm designing them so that they can be an A5 front, spread, and back. So if I ever design like just a one-off scenario, I can print these up and I can have them as convention. Like, here you go, you can play this real quick, or
you could put them in a book and they'll all, that makes a lot of sense. That's smart. That's smart. I want to talk a little bit about like, where do you get your ideas and your inspirations? Sometimes your tank runs out and you're out of ideas. Like, where do you go to fill those up for Vastgrim?
I mean, I guess it just has to be every media that I watch, and because I'm definitely pulling things from everything that I've watched and done, because you have to.
What's some of the recent gas in your tank?
I really, really liked Silo.
Dude, so good. Oh my God. Are you caught up?
Yes, I am.
I thought season 2 was, I'm not going to go too spoilerly here, but I did think it was a little slow. It was a little like,
yes, totally.
Like, come on, guys. Like Tomas, the guy who does Mornheim and Trench Crusade, he talks about this thing called the closed door in narrative storytelling, which is where like you put something in the story, but you don't tell people what it is ever. It's a very Lost thing, the closed door, you know? And like, then the trick is like, when you get around to developing it, you make people think you've known that the whole time.
Well, I mean, that's like leaving things open-ended is such a key part of my creative process.
Yeah.
Because what I'm going to come up with a year from now that ties it together is going to be so much better than whatever it is when I'm on like this one kind of singular path. Yeah.
So I felt like season 2 of Silo had like not enough closed door. It was like getting from A to B. And I'm like, wait, what about the, like, what's the, I want to know the thing, you know, it's like, so, I mean, it was still great too. The production design of that show, amazing.
Like something about the concept of the buildings, like that has really influenced some ideas for a Wormforged book that's in my next project line. But it ties into this because while creating Wormforged, I created a faction of characters that believe that like this current universe has to be the last universe.
Okay.
Because the Grimm are going to get all the pieces to this Gate of Infinite Stars. They're going to have that, and then they're going to be able to go into every single other multiverse and consume everything. So this group of people wants to destroy this universe and make it just be the last one. So that jumping concept goes way back to like Sliders or any other like, you know, TV show like that I grew up on.
Or now everything Marvel now is that way. Yeah.
But I put that into this. That's the first stretch goal that's going to unlock. And you're going to jump into Brian Shutter's Neon Lords universe.
Oh, sweet.
But there's a time mechanic. So you get pulled back into Sqwurmish after so many rounds.
Yeah.
And then your very own Zach has one of the stretch goals down the road where it's going to jump into one of his universes and then pull you back. So
you could use that for anything, right? Put him into Cyborg, put him in the Mörk Borg. Yeah, why not?
And Will, who created Forbidden Psalm, he's a stretch goal. So like and that's going to go into his last war. So like being able to play in other sandboxes for me is a nice little like refreshing, like it makes you look at things in a different way.
Yeah.
And then approach what you're doing slightly differently.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. It's like such the artist's journey, you know, like it's like every month you're like, oh, I'm in a new place now. And I'm like, the things I'm soaking in are from a different source. And like the thing I want to be good at is different, you know? And I'm like, I don't know. It's fun. It's a fun ride. I'm always curious when I talk to other artists, you know, because I talk to a lot of designers on this show, and like you and I are artist creators. So I really always love to know, like, where do you go when you need more, you know?
I think just trying to do something slightly differently, like doing the kit bashing and starting to build terrain, that's very refreshing and fun. And that, since that is influencing the actual scenario development based on whatever I build, that in itself is just doing things slightly differently.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I mean, like I'm kind of going through the same thing here I'm playing Mordheim for the first time on Sunday.
Awesome.
And I the guy I'm meeting up with, he's been playing since 99. So he's got like a bunch of terrain and a bunch of war bands, but I'm like, I want to bring something. I don't want to be like, I have nothing. So I just made a war band. I used the Lich undead list and just used some Rum and Bones miniatures I had for Pyre. So I'm like, I feel like there's no way I'm going to leave that thing on Sunday and not have a bunch of new ideas for Pyre Borg, you know? So I can totally imagine that you get your head out of I spend so much time thinking about fonts and colors and the layout of the page. And sometimes I forget what it's like to be in the Caribbean, you know? I have to imagine it's the same way we were molding clay and paying bills and oh no, I love this world, you know?
Yes. Yeah. It's so fun to play in it. It's very different. Thursday, I'm going over to a friend's house because he's a tabletop engineer. His YouTube is the Tabletop Engineer. Jim, he was like, hey, would you want to come over and film Sqwurmish? I was like, sure.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go and just play and get to actually I feel like this is much easier for me to sit down and play for 45 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, also there's no prep, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And I love RPGs. There's no question that's my favorite way to game.
Absolutely.
But you kind of do have to have the right group. And you need to be in the right place. There are conditions for that experience going off perfectly. Mm-hmm. And there's no question the highs for an RPG is you can't be, you're 6 months into a campaign and this one character kills the boss. It's amazing, you know?
Yes.
But I love the idea that I'm going to Sunday, I'm going to go to a game shop and we're going to set up a bunch of terrain and pretend to be in this shitty city for 3 hours or, 45 minutes or whatever. Yeah. That sounds awesome to me, you know?
It's super fun. When are we going to get to play? Is Origins the first place we'll get to play?
Yeah, I think Origins.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've got this skirmish game. It's happening. You've got, I don't know, how many Vasgrim books do you have now?
So there's the core book. There's Skeleton Crew, which is the bare bones edition. And then there's 6 expansion books. There's a handful of zines, some quick start zines, I Want Your Skulls, Into the Wormhole. There's 2 printed Adventures in the Volatile Verse, which is guest adventures, but Ross and I put some extra filler in there. So that, that's a 6, 7, 8 plus some zines. That's a pretty substantial.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, now you've got the skirmish game on the way and you have this card game Plunder Lust, which I want to talk about. But I think it's really cool that you are, just because you made a really great role-playing game doesn't mean that you have to be into role-playing games to enjoy your world. And I think that's one of the cool things about a skirmish game and also Plunder Lust, which is a card game, because just look at the tabletop gaming community. There's no question it's as big, if not bigger than the RPG community, especially 100%. From a dollar standpoint, because these people are so obsessed and they're obsessed with the lore, even though they're not exploring the lore in those games, you know? Talk about growing the Vasgrim world and brand, but also tell us about Plunder Lust.
Now that there's all 3, I kind of see those as my 3 pillars. Okay. I want the RPG, the card game, and the skirmish game to keep releasing content to support the games each year so that they're continuing to strengthen one another. And they all overlap in certain ways. Plunder Lust, the card game, the card stats on them, the armor, the hit points, the weapons, they can all be used in the RPG, which means if they can be used there, they can also be used in Sqwurmish.
Yeah, so why not, man?
All overlapping and weaving. But the card game itself I had played 7-7. It was a Mörk Borg card game by Duncan Hall. I had downloaded it off his itch page because he had participated in one of my Vasgrim game jams. Yeah. Right. So I was at his itch page and I saw that. I was like, yeah, I'll buy this and play it. And I played it with my kids and my wife, and we all really liked it. But I can't make mechanics. I know this. That's why I like rules light RPGs.
Yeah, and why you like hacking them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I reached out to Duncan. I was like, hey, I know you already like Vasgrim. Would you want to do a card game using your game that you already have a third-party license for, and you write it? And he was all over it. He knew my lore, so knowing that I wanted to create 7 different decks based on each of the 7 space pirate factions. He was already in the book and statting out characters that are already, the names are listed in the books, but there isn't much else. And he's already building it out. And it's already, I got the prototypes from the printer right before Chinese New Year. I've gone through everything. I've sent back revisions. Duncan's proofread it. There were a handful of like typo things that I knew we would hit because I was hustling so hard to get it so I could have prototypes for Gamma. For those that aren't watching, Gamma is the industry trade show because I want to show these off to stores and distributors because they look good. They're bright, they're vibrant. They're not like other games that are out there. So I think people will be like, ooh, what's the shiny?
Yeah, of course. It's funny that you said that. If we're showing off prototypes, this is my starter set box.
Oh, hell yeah, that's beautiful.
And it's all, you can't really see it here, but it's
got the spot gloss on it that I can emboss.
The blood is like all, and I'm pretty stoked.
Hell yeah.
That'll be at Gamma too. So
here is the
look at that
Plunder Lust box.
Look at us making stuff.
This is a little bit short. This is the long box deck box that's going to have all the decks inside of it. I don't have them in there now because
that's really cool.
I've got a retailer display box that has 2 of each deck that also has a pop-up that can sit in a retail stand. So
nice. I need to pick your brain about that stuff because I would love to do when our Down Among the Dead stuff ships, one of those like retailer pop-up where it holds all the Pirate Borg stuff. Like this stuff's just cool. Like, you know,
and like I used to do that stuff all the time for client work with heavier stuff, shipper boxes, doing that built into the cardboard box itself. So what it ships actually turns into a display.
Cool. That's a cool
we can
idea.
talk. I'll give you all sorts of ideas.
Yeah, man. You know, look at us, entrepreneur in our little weird universes into actual companies. Like, oh man, it's a cool time to be alive. I don't know. Just watching these Trench Crusade guys like make $5 million. I don't know if you know that guy's story at all, but he basically like, he's a concept artist and he just would like get irritated that they would like not let him do what he wanted at Blizzard or he did a couple Magic cards and he like worked on the Warhammer online and he'd like go home and like, I'm just going to draw whatever the fuck I want.
As you should.
Yeah. And then after 7 years, people were like all about it. And so he like reached out to the Mordheim guy and the guy was like, I'm in. And like, and now they're like taking over the world. Like they're like not going to give 40K a run for their money, but it's like hot, you know?
So now that you're new into this side, like you're reintroduced back into this side, have you checked out 28 Mag?
I literally just found out about it like an hour ago. So,
and the Kickstarter just closed for their hardcover book, collecting everything. I bet they'll have a pledge manager for it. The guy that's running that, the Kickstarter itself is US based, but it's a collection of a bunch of people from all over.
This is going to sound weird to say, but like, I feel like I know everybody in the RPG scene now. Like, there's like a few people who I haven't met, but everybody who I really look up to, who's like in our little OSR scene, I've at least like bumped elbows with.
Yeah, totally. Know? It's a different circle. It's a different.
Yeah. And I'm like, all of a sudden I have like a whole new source of inspiration, you know?
I'm right there with you.
It's exciting stuff. I mean, you know, like also art wise, I've been very down this like Mike Mignola, Darkest Dungeon, Chris Barassa vibe, Inky Blacks. And I love that. But seeing some of the Trench Crusade stuff, I'm like, I think maybe it's time for me when I get this next Kickstarter done to like go back to like go to school. I actually talked to my wife. I was like, hey, what do you think about me going to class in quotes like every Monday and just, you know, watching online YouTube videos and like try to develop and push for, cause like, who are you if you're not pushing, you know? Like,
there's a couple of like smart schools like that you could do. I know Alan still does a handful, at least one of those every like semester online.
Oh, nice.
Where you have, and I'm sure he's really dialed in at least to the fantasy side of online classes like that.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I have mixed feelings too, because my style I can do quickly. I got this one concept art video where he's like, you know, he talks over it while they're playing it in like triple time. He's like, oh yeah, this looks like it only took me 7 or 8 hours, but it really took like more than a week. And I'm like, whoa, dude, I'm not going to spend a week on one character. Like I got to go.
So there's a difference between doing it for the work and doing it for yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Tell me about that. Do you do a lot of stuff for yourself?
No, definitely not.
I was going to say, cause like, dude, I don't have time for myself. I've never I don't think I've ever, since I started this whole thing, picked up a pencil and been like, I'm going to draw this for me. I'm just going to draw this for fun. I'm always like, it's got to be able to go into Dark Caribbean somewhere.
Right. I'm drawing it's like, how can this be a monster for Patreon this month? Like,
exactly. I know this is part of the nature of the thing, but I don't know. It's hard to like separate the two. I mean, even with this skirmish thing, I was like, oh yeah, maybe I'm going to play Trench Crusade. And like, cause I can't make that about work. And then immediately it was like, oh, actually this is a lot like work. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm just going to learn from this.
Yep. And like, I don't see why you wouldn't do a Forbidden Psalm hack to fit in with everything else that you're already doing and to fit in with those.
I don't know. I think we're going to do nothing against Forbidden Psalm, but I think our approach is going to be a little bit more from the ground up. It's going to inherently be compatible with Pirate Borg, which will make it inherently compatible with Forbidden Psalm in a lot of ways. But I think we're going to do like, this is just my, I'm just like spitballing here. And please, nobody listening to this, hold me to any of this because we aren't even going to start like actually working on this project until after the Dark Caribbean ships. And that hasn't even I haven't even gone back to full time into that. So, but I think it's going to be a little bit more like we have a set list of factions like you do,
right? But
the factions have different units that you're picking from. Because one of my approaches is that I really want to, as I'm designing the bestiary and monster and faction spreads for Dark Caribbean, be doing that character design with miniatures in mind down the road.
Nice.
And I want to be like, okay, I really want the Wretched to have like these like low level cultist dudes, but then I want their like bigger boss monster, like sea creature things to be very Cthulhian, because of that nature, I want it to be a little bit more like I'm picking a faction. What can I go in that faction? And like Forbidden Psalm's a little bit more like, hey, you've got 10 dudes or 5 dudes and like, roll up their stats,
I think the faction stuff will also align more with existing wargamers and how they think about it, which not having the experience with it, I was like, oh yeah, okay, 5 guys.
Can you imagine someone set up, I'll use Vastgrim as an example. You've got a really cool display table set up at a convention. And it's like one of those ones that you've spent, exactly. Like that one in the back there. Yeah. You've spent weeks or months building this display that comes everywhere. It looks like something out of StarCraft. That's so cool. And someone sees that walking by and they're like, oh my God, what is this? And if they're a war gamer, right? They're like, oh, it's a new skirmish game from Creature Curation, They get into it and they get into the rules and they're like, well, what's this guy? And you're like, oh, by the way, there's a whole RPG source book about that guy. Like there's a whole subset of missions. That's a whole faction, where you're not doing the closed door, where it's like, hey, no, we have stats and motivations for these characters. Like that just sounds so, I've never seen that before. And I'm just so excited for that to exist.
I mean, that whole cross-pollination, that's the whole concept behind my like pillar ideas. Like you want the fans of each one to bleed into one another because some people are going to want it all. And some people are only going to want one thing.
Hardcore, absolutely. But even though I can't imagine that anybody will be equally dabbling. People just have their. And I also think solo gaming can be a big part of this. Like there's so many
solo
options.
mode's huge in the skirmish side.
So I was going to say, skirmish mode. If you're playing a game like this or like Frostgrave Ghost Archipelago, like where there's monsters on the board trying to kill you, just load them up with monsters and make AI rules. I had a question about Plunder Lust because it's been a minute. Is that a dice-based game?
Yes. It's the same thing. Like when you're fighting a monster, you're rolling a D20 to try and hit the difficulty
so it's basically a card-based version of Vastgrim.
Yes.
You see, that's hot. I'm
you all use your funny shaped dice. It all feels similar and familiar.
Now, I've played almost all of the Star Wars card games. Well, the older ones, but the one that we played the most competitively was the Wizards of the Coast Star Wars TCG. And that was the one where you were rolling D6s. And I feel like a lot of people really didn't like that. Like if you come from Magic or you come from another more competitive card game where it's like all about your decisions and the cards that you get.
There's too much variable to it.
Yeah. Right? And I remember going against this guy who had built like and this is a deep dive, but I think the nerds might appreciate it. So in that game, you can play with multiple different versions of the same hero. So like if you have Darth Vader, you could have up to 4 different Darth Vaders on his stack. And for each one in his stack, he gets a buff to his stats.
Okay.
But you can flip them around for a cost if you want to like use the different ones of, Vader R's availability instead of Vader K's ability, right?
Okay.
Well, so I'm playing against this guy and he's got a Luke Skywalker deck, but if you're playing with this one Yoda, there's no limit to the size of Luke Skywalker's stack. So you can basically like take a shitty Luke and train him up and like put 10 different Luke Skywalkers on there, you know, and he's playing with this thing and, you know, and he's rolling like crap and I'm rolling amazing. And I have this new version of Vader that his damage can't be prevented, you know, and I just like slaughtering this guy and a larger part with the dice rolls. And he was so mad, but I was also like, yo, man, that's how it goes. Like you could have drawn a bad card, you know? So
I always roll bad, so like I know I'm not going to do well.
You got to switch to a roll under game, like Into the Odd or Mouse Ritter or something.
Yeah, it's too late. Like I'm too invested in this line.
Well, I didn't mean professionally, but I realize now saying that to you is like someone saying it to me. Like, of course, I'm not gonna.
I do love Mouse Ritter. I've run that a number of times and have thoroughly enjoyed it.
Incredible. I've only played once or twice, and I'm very sad about it. I feel like part of my descent back into Magic, which has not been as deep as I thought it was going to be, but I did buy a bunch of Bloomburrow cards and I bought some Ixalan Commander decks because who doesn't love pirates versus dinosaurs and vampires, but I feel like I have a Mouse Ritter, a couple one shots or a short campaign in my near future for sure. Just the idea of like small furly woodland role-playing game.
Especially with lots of violence and blood.
Do you have a RPG? I think I call it like my RPG crushes. Like I have a list on my phone that I started this year called things that I want to do. I put on there things like, you know, playing a Bloomburrow inspired Mouse Ritter campaign or playing Alien RPG, stuff that is not ever going to be about work. Right. You know, do you have anything like that? Do you have any like dreams or hopes or games that you would really want to play? RPG campaigns that you'd really, if you had, you know, more time than you do?
Shoot. Like I honestly have never, I've never really thought about that. It's always hustling between conventions and putting out new projects.
Brian, we gotta get you into some fun.
I've started organizing RPG nights at my local brewery twice a week that I can walk to. So
twice a week?
Not twice a week, twice a month. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I was like, wow, that's
So I've ran some. I've played in one of the.
But are you always running Vastgrim?
I tried to run Over the Troll Bridge, which is a game that I made with my kids a few years back. I played in a basic RPG, like 1700s murder mystery type thing. I am running Vastgrim because now that I'm running it, like last time my table was 8 people. I've never played, even though I have it, I've never played 3-2-1 Action. I'd like to play that. I'd like to play Shadow Dark because I've never played that, even though I have that. I'd really like to play The Zone, which I have, but I've never played.
You got to make that stuff happen, man.
So I'd like to play those and not actually run them.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, you just gotta. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
And it's hard because like every time I play at conventions now, it's like well after the show's over. And then it's like 15 people. And like, I like smaller groups where I feel like at a certain point, my brain just kind of shuts down and doesn't really contribute like how I like to role play. Like I like actually being invested in it. And it's just too big of a group to. The
problem with a lot of those post-con games is that like, usually there's like one guy who's really been pumped to run something and has something planned, and everyone else is fried. So like I have the energy to role play, but I don't want to run something because that takes a lot of, you know, energy and pressure sometimes, you know. What you really need is just a few more people to be like, I'm willing to run, because, you know, I was in one of those games with you and I think that would have been a more fun experience if we had just done 2 tables, done 2 different adventures rather than like 15 people in one, you know. Let's talk a little bit about the Molt.
Yes.
I think you're shipping soon. Is that correct?
That is correct. I got the word from Exalted Funeral that it's shipping this week. So by the time people hear this, it may be showing up in people's mailboxes.
We didn't even talk about this, but after the Kickstarter, the Molt got picked up by EF, Exalted Funeral, for distribution and publishing, right?
Publishing, yep.
Give us the elevator for pitch. It's basically a full Mörk Borg hack, right?
It's a full Mörk Borg hack set in the center of the Mörk Borg planet, right?
Yeah.
So the concept is that inside the planet, it's all these different creatures. They're all based off of sculptures that I made before, like these weird monstrous creatures and all these species that they believe that the planet is supposed to shed its outer shell, and their whole purpose is to kill humanity. Yeah. So they're trying to come up because, like, over on the eastern side of the map, of the Mörk Borg map, there's the space where there's the water coming in, and right over there is where there's a crack in the surface, and so they're working their way out and spilling out onto the surface of the Mörk Borg planet. So, in theory, you're playing as these creatures trying to kill all of humanity. But you could play it from the other side as though you're a party, like an adventuring party in Mörk Borg, descending down into the Molt. into core, which is KOR, which is, the core of the planet, and that's what they call it. So it's got a magic system, which is all based on spending PP or PowerPoints to harness things. There's different categories or different magical spheres, whether it's like elemental or controlling people, things like that. So you spend points to be able to do bigger and stronger things, but it's all very narrative based. Mm-hmm. So if you can imagine it and you have enough points to spend on it, you can make weird shit happen.
Nice. That's cool. That's very cool. I'm excited to get that. Obviously back everything you make. Did Grim Outlook, did that ship yet?
Yes, that shipped. That was 6 months. That campaign from start to shipping was 6 months.
Is that the one? Did it have 3 books in it or just the one?
It did. It had 3 books plus the skeleton crew. I
don't know if I missed that one. Maybe I missed one. I'll have to come hit your booth up.
Yeah,
because I see
that was on backer kit.
Oh, maybe I just missed it. That seems weird. But I have Crawling Death, which is, we talked about that last time. That's your Mörk Borg kind of generative adventure module. I have Vastgrim, and I have Blood Altered, Space Raiders, and Space Cruisers.
Yes. So a Grim Outlook, No Safe Haven, Helltrap Barges, and Skeleton Crew were the books that were part of that.
I love it. I was on your website I was doing research for today, and I was like, Grim Outlook, and you were like, I read Buried in Bahamas and realized blah blah blah. I was like, wow, that's my adventure. Wow, it's so cool. It's
cool. And that's what, like, the first 2 acts in that were our convention adventure this past year.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Completely inspired by that.
I really for me with Pirate Borg, I just went so deep, especially with all the stretch goals on the core adventure, that I was like, this is not wieldy for someone new to, and it was kind of one of those, like, it didn't really match in the level of like, oh, you just bought a rules light pirate game. Here's a 10 session open world, sandbox campaign where the NPCs, you're totally in control with it. It's like, we kind of needed something a little more, railroady to start. So I'm glad to see. I haven't read it yet, clearly, because I don't have it. So
one of the main things that, like, when reading that was like being like, oh yeah, you need to set the tone and let people know what this whole universe is about, because all the other, like, quick start adventures that Ross and I had created up to that point, it didn't really focus around, holy shit, there's these alien hive mind like species, the Grimm, that are trying to take over everything. And this, it like throws you into it, and it's like, oh yes, I need to run. Yeah.
So it's fun because I get to do that again here with Trapped in the Tropics, and I've really been thinking about, like, I had a lot of really long talks with myself, a lot of mood boards, and thinking like, what is in the quintessential Pirate Borg adventure? What is Pirate Borg? Like, if someone plays this 1 time or 4 times because they played through only the one that came in the starter set, which will happen for a lot of people, I'm sure.
Totally.
What will they have done in that experience that will be like, oh yeah, I played Pirate Borg and this happened, So I'm assuming you had the same kind of.
Usually I'm too close. And that's like, after reading Buried in the Bahamas, that's when I kind of took the step back and realized, oh, I need to look at it from that bigger picture perspective.
What kind of things can you give us specifics of, like, things that you included that you might not have thought to include before?
That sense of dread and like that you are smaller than everything else that's coming into the universe. Because like I hadn't really put Grimm. So in the scenario, the starting scenario, you're on a space station, a refueling station, and you don't have a starship. All of a sudden, like, the starship gets hit, the lights flicker, things like that. It starts to lose power. It's been docked by a Grimm starship, and the Grimm just kind of start coming in. Like, they work their way towards the party, and they keep fun. Like, the hallway, there's just so many of them, and another ship docks, and you can see overhead through the glass dome. You can see these other ships popping into view. Yeah. So it's like, oh God, there's no way you can survive. So it, like, starts to really give that overall feeling that, like, there's not much of humanity left.
Yeah.
And you really need to do whatever you can to try and survive.
Yeah. Nice. I like that a lot. For me, it's been like, well, I need to introduce Ash, and I need to introduce it in a way that is, like, very impactful, And we need to introduce the undead, but, like, we need to let the players know how this is like Walking Dead, but also how it's not like Walking Dead, in what ways, And then obviously I think the big thing for us, since we're just reflecting on this, is like there's plenty of naval combat opportunities in the core book of Pirate Borg, but none of them are, like, handed to the GM,
Right.
And like in my mind, you don't need that. It's like obviously when they have a boat, you are now in go roll in the naval combat thing. You're there. Why do you need me to give you an encounter?
Yeah.
But one of the few criticisms that I got that I was like, oh yeah. I mean, there's been criticism, but the ones that I was like, yeah, I could see why that has happened has been like some GMs, they need at least the first
intro to be like
yeah, they need the intro laid out.
Yeah.
So what we're doing, part 2 of the 4 parts of Trapped in the Tropics is like, they have a boat now. Now they got to get from here to here, and you should be rolling on these tables, you know?
Well, and like every time I've run a game where at the end of the scenario, they have a starship, man, is the party excited.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So if they get a boat and at the end of the scenario, the act 1, and then for part 2, they have that, they're going to be thrilled.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of, I mean, it will of course have to start similar to Bury the Bahamas in that like, you got to get them there on a boat or a ship, and then you got to take the boat or ship away, but like, that's the railroady part. You got to start them somewhere, and you want them, you want them to be excited that they got the thing, you know, like, dude, I'm climbing into the gunner port right now. You know, I'm strapping in, don't get cocky, kid. You know, you said something just now that made me wonder, have we talked about Alien much? Just
a little bit. I think last time we were on, but not a ton.
Are you an Aliens fan? Did you see Romulus?
I saw Romulus and I loved it. I thought it was great.
Because I feel like I'm asking because I loved Romulus, but I also yesterday just finished the William Gibson. There's an audible, what do they call that? Like an audio drama of William Gibson's second script for Alien 3.
Okay.
Which is a totally different story. It's on a space station. Hicks and Newt survive, and they do weird shit. It's much more like Black Goo, weird shit with the aliens. And I was just wondering, like, what'd you think of Romulus? Is aliens an influence on Sqwurmish?
Probably not as much.
A vast scrim, I'd say, in general.
Yeah, probably not as much, only because like I saw those when I was younger.
Yeah,
and my memory and retention for stuff is garbage. Movies and books, I can watch them, I can read them, and then like a couple days later, it's like boop.
You don't have like a core like 4 or 5 appendix N for Vast Grim that really. I feel like we probably talked about this last time, but
yeah. I mean, sure. There's certain things like things that I've watched multiple times.
Yeah,
that kind of that tend to influence things like that. Like things that I've watched multiple times. Like I watched the Firefly TV series multiple times.
Great show. Yeah.
I watched Slither multiple times. You know, James Gunn's gross B movie style.
I don't think I've seen that. Yeah.
Things that I grew up watching that I'd watch over and over again because they were like the ones that we had on the floppy RCA disc, or the things that were like on the Betamax that we had recorded, like Last Starfinder and the core Star Wars movies.
Yeah,
things like that greatly influenced. Like thinking about Khan and the beetle, the burrowing into the brain, like. That stuff definitely influences like the worm stuff, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the stuff that I don't remember well still influences the stuff.
Yeah.
I just can't be like, oh yeah, this and this.
I think I find it very interesting because you have a very strong focus as a creator. You really understand what your world is, and we're very similar in that way. But I am like very, very much a like influences. I can list you right now every movie and book that is like part of my DNA and part of the Pirate Borg and Dark Caribbean's DNA, and you're not like that. And I find that just as interesting, like that you have such a strong sense of your IP's DNA, but it's not drawn from pop culture as much as mine is.
And I'm sure it's drawn from it because I mean I've consumed
you think it's
it
more
all.
like osmosis, like subconscious.
Yeah.
Okay, you're like a worm. Yeah. So it's actually you're on brand. You just okay. I love that.
Hold fast, wretched sailor. We brace for the broadside barrage.
What's the best thing you've seen come out of the OSR in the past year? Or the tabletop industry as a whole, if you prefer?
It hasn't been in the past year, but I keep going back to Into the Cessan Citadel.
Oh my God. I just got it not too long ago. That was my RPG crush for like 6 months.
Yeah, it's magnificent. So like, I mean,
is it just because it's hot pink?
No, yes. No.
Be honest.
I think it's because like, you know how I said like I read stuff and it doesn't like it doesn't stick. I go back and reread it and it's like it's brand new.
I mean, I guess this tracks for you, but it is worthy of that title. This is a great Charlie Ferguson Avery did that world. What's the Into the Weird and Wild is like his like dark fantasy book, and then he did Never Going Home, and this is their like. It's like a city crawl, kind of very like well done. I'll see if I can show this off to the YouTubers.
And it's been influencing my thoughts on the thing that I talked about earlier, the Wormforged, which is like a space station that's influenced by Silo, like that sort of thing, thinking of there being different sectors within the space station and how that changes when you go and you travel through them and things like that. That's kind of why it's in my brain a bit.
I'm glad you mentioned it because I have a new spreadsheet now that I don't have everything in there yet. I have everything that's not my OSR shelf, but my OSR shelf is fucking huge. So but I color coding it, whether it's like haven't looked at it, have perused it, have like deep dived it, or have consumed it, which means I've either read it cover to cover, or in the case of like an adventure, a tome of adventure design is like a reference book. Like, okay, I get this. I'm not going to read every entry,
Sure. Yeah.
That one is like level 2. Like I love what's in there, but man, I got to read it. So you're making me excited to read it. Okay. RPG setting you least want to visit.
A World War type of setting. I'm not a historical person. I don't want to play any historical stuff. I want to play weird, bizarre shit.
So would Trench Crusade, that sounds like a pretty terrible place to visit, but you're saying if it's in reality, it's even worse for your opinion.
Oh yeah, that'd be even worse. Yeah.
Yeah. If it was actual World War I, you're like, nope. No, thanks.
Yep,
okay.
No.
Yeah, I get you. We kind of already talked about this, but Kickstarter project or upcoming RPG release you are most excited about receiving?
Glumdark's pretty damn good.
I've been talking to Zach about this. I haven't backed it yet, but I don't really know why. I think it just am like,
as much as you love random tables,
I just need to go press the button. It's got nothing to do with the project.
The creators are awesome. Like I was chatting with him about it prior to him going over to Exalted Funeral. So for them to publish
I'm going to go back at right after this. Tyler, make sure we get Glumdark in the notes because it's one of those, like, also when you back like 5 or 6 Kickstarters in a row, you get like, oh my God, I'm another one.
Right. I know.
But that's kind of where it came in the thing, You're in the Enterprise's holodeck. What's the first program you're loading up?
So I think I'm going to like layer worlds, right? And I'm going to layer up the X-Men's, but they had the similar thing where, and so then I can play with the X-Men too.
Okay, so what are you doing though? You're like the X-Men are that you press the button, the X-Men show up.
I guess I'm training with them just so I can see what they like. This is me not being fat and overweight and old, But
so you're like in the Matrix and you're like,
and I'm fighting Sentinels. I'm fighting Sentinels and trying to batch in these giant
robots. Are we talking like 90s cartoon?
Totally, yeah.
Okay, not like the movies.
Well, maybe some of the earlier. I'd be okay either way. I could be animated. I could be real life.
Did you see the new show X-Men? What's it called?
97.
97, yeah.
Yeah, totally. That was good.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Favorite Star Wars planet?
Okay, this isn't my favorite planet, but this one has actually influenced sort of my creative process. What's the one where they land down and all the red dust is coming up? Was that in Rogue One?
I actually don't know the names of the newer ones, but you're talking about in Rise of Skywalker.
Yes, and like that is,
or I'm sorry, Last Jedi, Last 8. Jedi.
That's completely how I picture the planet where the mausoleum of they is, like where the worms were first released, because I talk about there being red dust everywhere and stuff like that. So when I visually saw that coming up, like that's like I can totally picture a cinematic view.
Yeah, that one's cool because it like looks like it's snow, but then it's red underneath. And you're like, oh, it's like no, it's its own like salt deposit thing. You've been given an invincible time and space machine. What era of history are you visiting?
I mean, do you go back and kill Hitler? I think that's the right answer.
It's a pretty good one. Okay, but what about more of let's say you can't change anything. Let's say it's like an invisible time and space viewing machine. You can go back and watch, but you can't.
You can go back and watch and you can't do anything. Probably go back to the late 70s and watch a lot of people disco dancing.
Add an entry to the Who's on Board the Ship of the Dead D100 table.
They are an ash peddler. Well, no, an ash smuggler. They've got a bandolier of strange, dead, dried out worms on them. And inside each of them is an intestine, like you would encase a sausage in like pills of ash shoved into each one.
That's so good. Do you have a favorite science fiction character?
Something, and this just goes back to the action figure. I've always loved Bosk.
Oh, yeah, he's very cool.
Yeah, you didn't really know anything about him, but he also kind of looked like the aliens from V, which was like totally terrifying to me as a child, seeing them like peel their heads off and that's that sort of thing. So
this is the closed door, full circle. Like the thing that was so cool about those bounty hunters in Empire Strikes Back is you don't know anything about them and you never do, and then as soon as you do, they're not as cool anymore. There's no way It's like the same thing with the they used to call it the space jockey, the engineers in the Alien series, like those things were way cooler before Prometheus came out. It's just cooler not knowing. And I hate to say that J.J. Abrams has a really cool TED talk about this, where he brings this magic present box that his grandpa gave him when he was a kid. That he never opened. It has like a mysterious prize, and he brings it to this TED talk, and he talks about how crazy that is. But then, of course, he doesn't open it. Spoiler: he doesn't open it at the TED talk. He's like, that's what makes it so cool. Is you don't like if you know it's in the box, it's never going to match your expectations. So.
Oh, that's fantastic! Yeah, I love that.
All right, Brian. Well, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. I love talking to you. I can't wait to see you. I guess at Origins will be the next time.
Yes. I love seeing you and talking to you. Thank you.
Yes, please tell us what's the best place to find. Obviously, you can check the show notes, but where can people find out about Sqwurmish, and where can they find you on the internet?
The best place to go is briancolin.com. That's like my page that has all my links to everything.
And that's colon 1L.
1L, and Brian spelled with an I because the Y's are evil.
The Y's are creeping in.
I know.
They're creeping in.
Fight them off.
Yeah. And this episode will air while there is plenty of time left on Sqwurmish. Please go back and I backed it today. Can't wait to play it with you, Brian. I'm so glad that we're descending into tabletop miniature madness together.
Yes.
And thanks for being aboard the Ship of the Dead.
Yarr.
You've been listening to the Ship of the Dead podcast. Email your questions, comments, and buried treasure tips to shipofthedead@limithron.com. You can support the program, join our Discord server, get early access to new episodes, and instantly download hundreds of battle maps, assets, and adventures at limithron.com/Patreon. Tiers start as low as $2 a release, and you only get charged when I make something new. Pirate Borg, my rules-light, rum-infested hack of Mörk Borg, is available now at pirateborg.com and retail stores everywhere. Ship of the Dead is produced by Limithron LLC. Our audio editor is Matt Kepler, and our music is by Alexander Miller. For more, head to limithron.com.